they've proven a lot of people wrong. James O'Connor has proven a lot of doubters wrong, and I probably put myself in that category. I'll put my hand up there. We've just got to be careful about that we're not speeding up the game so much that we're not taking full account of potential serious injuries. Feel privileged to have known that other side of Grizz, because the reputation, the big moustache and all that, was of a snarly sort of a guy, and of course off the field he was anything but that.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Super Rugby Round 6. It is always a pleasure to welcome in again from Sky Sports. You know him as a commentator. He's been a journalist the whole of his rugby career. And of course hosted his own programs as well. He is an expert analyst, and it's a great pleasure to get him back on Monday again, Tony.
Hello, Martin. 6
quick questions to start with, yes or no answers required, and then we're going to reflect on the life and times of a man that we both spent a fair bit of time around, Alex Wyllie. In no particular order. Are the Crusaders right now the form team in the competition?
Yep.
They lost to the Drua. They perhaps fortunate to beat the Blues, and they buttoned off completely in the second half versus MP. Are there chinks in the Chiefs' armour all of a sudden?
No. I presume you are serious about wanting yes or no answers.
All right, just yes or no. We will get into all these topics. Are the Blues still capable of making the top 6?
The answer's probably a little bit closer to no than it was last week.
4 Aussie sides in the top 6 for the first time ever. Does that mean they're winning the Bledisloe?
No.
I felt like I was back on Radio Sport for a second there, Tony. Can we call it a day already on MP and the Drua in terms of making the finals?
Okay, I'm not going to answer that with yes or no. Obviously, the chances are receding, but they are still going to have their part to play in the telling of this Super Rugby story.
Last question then. Should Razor be worried about the form of some of his All Blacks, including those Blues players?
No.
We will divert, or we will get into those topics in a little bit more, all of them shortly. Let's reflect on Alex Wyllie, who died over the weekend. Alex Grizz Wyllie, 13 tests for the All Blacks, 210 games for Canterbury, an All Black coach, an All Black assistant coach in 1987. Some of the greatest TV ads made by any rugby player ever, and just a real character. I really like that guy. I got to spend, fortunately, a lot of time around him, just at various times and functions, and also just sitting there having a beer with him on occasions, talking rugby. I always liked him, Tony. He always came across to me as a really personable kind of guy.
Oh, yeah, and if you were lucky enough to be in that position, then you would see a side of Grizz that was apart from the persona. It was different to the persona. I mean, as a player, he was a hell of a player, as you say, over 200 games for Canterbury. And also he took part in 2 big All Black tours. He was, I suppose, what was referred to as a meanie, and by that I don't mean a dirty player. He was a hard player. He was a player who never took a backward step to anyone. He was actually more skillful though than he wasn't just all about that. He could kick the ball, he could punt the ball, he could actually kick goals as well, and did so on occasion. So he was an outstanding player. Because he went away on those 2 tours, the first one to South Africa in 1970, and then the tour of 72-73.
Made famous by the hats, right?
Yeah,
the Mafia hats.
And, reputation tarnished by that. Look, that story was a bit of a concoction, really.
Okay, just in case you don't know, there was Alan Sutherland, there was Tane Norton and Alex Wyllie. We've lost them all, and they had these hats.
Black-brimmed hats, and they were dubbed the Mafia. So what happened was they were in Vancouver on the way over. Sid Going wanted to buy a hat because he was going bald. He wanted to buy a beret, and so they went into this hat shop, and he saw his beret, and then a couple of the others, they saw these black, broad-brimmed hats, and they thought these would be perfect for the jury on the Sunday morning court session, which every team did in those days.
Yep.
The problem was, and Tane Norton gave me the full story of this when we did the book Behind the Silver Fern. He said you couldn't put them in your suitcase because they'd get squashed.
Right.
And so they wore them on their heads when they were on the bus or going on a plane or something. Someone got them to pose for a photograph. Now,
very famous photo.
They weren't exactly grinning from ear to ear, but someone saw this and dubbed them the Mafia. And it
stuck.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. And it certainly stuck to a detrimental effect on Grizz's career because I think he played the next year. There was a test against England, which they lost at Eden Park, and then JJ Stewart came in And there was a big changing of the guard, and a number of players got left out of the trip to Australia, and Grizz and Alan Sutherland were two of them. Alan Sutherland fought his way back in for the tour in 1976 to South Africa. Grizz never played for the All Blacks again. But as I say, the general consensus amongst the All Black players is that the mafia, well, it didn't really exist. Yeah, sure, they were sitting near the back of the bus, but it was a bit of a concoction of the British media and part of a campaign that was being waged against the team at the time.
Yeah. I mean, and then Keith Murdoch got enveloped in that as well.
Of course. And the story at the end is that Tani, kept his hat till the day he died. I think Grizz lost his, and in the words of Tane, Alan Sutherland gave them to a girl somewhere.
Right.
Yeah. Gave his to a girl somewhere.
I forgot to also say that he was a legendary Canterbury coach as well, coached between 82 and 85.
Yeah.
And that Shield Challenge in 85, which is one of the greatest games ever of provincial rugby in this country, when the Blues Auckland were up way at half time. And there was that story about him where he just basically walks over to his forwards, hands them the ball and says, "This is what it looks like, go and get it."
Yeah.
And Canterbury came back, very nearly snatched it at the end.
Came within a fingertip.
It was.
Yeah.
Craig Green, I think, at the end there, wasn't it?
There was the high kick into the in goal. But
and the crowd was already in the in goal at that stage. So that was Lancaster Park in a day.
And Brian Lahore had the foresight to see in John Hart and Grizz Wyllie, two totally different characters, but if he could get them all in as part of his brains trust, working off the same sheet, then he would have a winning combination for the 1987 World Cup.
Yeah.
Then there was, of course, a bit of a to-do about who took over from Brian Lahore.
Mm-hmm. And it was Grizz?
Yeah. Some people felt that the Auckland team had superseded Canterbury at that stage. But the thinking of the panel was New Zealand Rugby, they Rugby Union, they chose Grizz. And of course, it all ended up. Grizz's record as All Black coach was very good. His winning percentage was
but it all
high.
came down to that semi-final, didn't it?
Well, of course it did in the end. It was really only towards the end when they lost a couple of tests to Australia, a couple of Bledisloe.
And the Aussies were on the right. They were
absolutely. They had a great team. And of course, you go into that World Cup, you've got this scenario where Eddie Tonks has unilaterally decided that John Hart has to be part of the coaching panel, which in the end didn't do either of them much good.
No.
It didn't do the team any good. There was definitely some division around that. There were compromises over the selection, a bit of trading going on, not a lot of clarity over what game they were going to play. But the other thing too is that was a tired All Black team.
It was, yeah. It was on the wane. Yeah,
they'd been flogged. They'd been going on and the tours were longer in those days, and they were draining. They'd gone to Argentina early on the year, which was senseless because they didn't really need to go on that tour. The draw was ridiculous because Australia, having finished fourth at the last World Cup, as soon as the All Blacks beat England in the opening game, put them on a collision course. Sunday game, Michael Jones couldn't play.
That's it.
Grant Fox had a groin injury, and Australia had a great team.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
And in the end, the All Blacks
16-6. That flattered us, that score. They outplayed us.
But that was just about the end for Grizz as the All Black coach. There was one more game to play, and I do have a little story about it.
Great, Tony. I love these.
I think it was about the Wednesday or the Thursday. They played Scotland in the playoff for third and fourth.
Yes, they did. That's right.
Now, Grizz wasn't the sort of guy to sit in his hotel room twiddling his thumbs on the night before a game. He wasn't the sort to go out to dinner either. He just liked to go out and relax somewhere. Now, John Hart, I think, was going out to... He wasn't likely to go to the pub with John Hart anyway, but John Hart was going out to dinner. I think he went out with some of the TVNZ guys. And then Sturge, the manager, who was a big supporter of Grizz, he was a teetotaler, so he wasn't going to go to the pub. And so Grizz would often look to the travelling press guys for a bit of company.
Travelling press, always keen on one of them.
Well, no, but it wasn't debauched. It wasn't boo. It was just a few quiet drinks the night before the game. And he was particularly fond of a couple of guys, and it was great to see John Macbeth being asked to make a tribute on TV1 News because he was really fond of John, and they knew each other through the bowls later in life. And Dave Leggett, of course, my old mate, sadly not with us anymore. Yeah,
he's a good dude too.
So anyway, we're in the bar of the house bar, the lounge area of the hotel we're staying in. Lego, Wingray.
Here's some names.
Yeah, John Macbeth, myself, and there's paging Mr. Leggett, phone call at reception. Lego goes away, comes back and goes, the big fella will be here in 5 minutes. So Grizz wants to have a couple of quiet beers, and he's rung Leggett. So Grizz, 5 minutes later exactly, bursts through the door like someone coming into a saloon in a Western movie. He looks around and goes, "Oh, there's a pub down the road." So we go to this pub down the road. It is the grubbiest, grottiest pub I've ever seen in my life. It was grimy. The clientele
I know those
dodgy.
pubs. Yeah, that's carpets just really
Yeah.
sodden and
You can't even see through the beer glasses, and the beer was awful, that terrible stuff they have over there. So we think, come on, Grizz, we could do a little bit better than this. All right then. So we go around the corner and it's kind of like a lounge, sort of nightclubby sort of place. We thought, that might do it. But there's a huge queue outside. We're thinking, we're not queuing. Just about to turn and walk away, and you hear this voice, "Alex, Alex, Alex." And it's the doorman going, "Come here, please come in." He goes, "I'm with these jokers." And yeah, and you come, lads. So we go in, we get in ahead of the queue, go upstairs, they find a couple of couches for us to sit down. And then all night, Welsh fans are coming, "Oh, Alex, lovely to see you here. Can I buy you a drink?"
Here we go.
And Grizz would go, "Yeah, I'm with these jokers." And so, "What are you having, lads?" So not only was it a good night, it was a bloody cheap one as well.
Brilliant.
But look, towards Grizz,
everyone's got some great stories.
He ended up in Picton, which was my old hometown.
Yep.
As you know, whenever you saw him, he always had time for a chat. So feel privileged to have known that other side of Grizz, because the reputation, the big moustache and all that, was of a snarly sort of a guy. And of course, off the field, he was anything but that.
Yeah. Rest in peace. We also lost George Foreman over the weekend.
Yeah.
So a couple of big.
Well, geez, talk about memories of your team. I'll never forget that.
Rumble in the Jungle, man.
Yeah.
Never. I mean, the greatest fight probably in the history of
and When We Were Kings, the greatest movie ever made about
watch
sport.
That. Watch that. All right, let's get on to Super Rugby over the weekend. And we've got to start with the Blues versus the Crusaders. And that was a beatdown. And the Crusaders, I thought, were physically impressive. And a Blues side that would be the worst they've played all season. They were just in disarray, Tony.
Yeah, and obviously, having had the news already of Ofa Tu'ungafasi, which seems like quite a serious injury, then losing Patrick Tuipulotu on top of other injuries. And as I've said, they're too significant to be dismissed as an excuse. But there are other factors too that came into it. Firstly, the Crusaders are just humming. And you think about all the cry last year about Rob Penny's not good enough for this job and the flack that he took. Yeah. Well, they're humming now that they don't have the injury list that they had last year.
And the replacements as they brought them on, All Black after All Black.
Yeah. But also, when you can bring a guy like James O'Connor on, and maybe we could talk about him in a moment, because I think he has to have a chance to start at some stage.
Well, he does, especially with Kamara's kicking, which isn't good.
Yeah, that's something. But look, that's something they can work on. I love the touches that Kemara is bringing around his game. He's growing in confidence, which is good. But to me, they've proven a lot of people wrong. James O'Connor has proven a lot of doubters wrong, and I probably put myself in that category. I'll put my hand up there because I wasn't sure whether of the wisdom of it. Well,
we've seen him come on as a sub, and he's been damn good, hasn't he? To tidy the game up at the end. But look, they were just... Tony, what impressed me was that, they conceded that first try, which was just a real slap in the face, and immediately I thought, hang on, the Blues are back. And from that point on, they just didn't let them play.
Yeah.
They just wrestled the game down.
And the Blues were making mistakes, just untidy kickoff receptions, disciplinary things, stuff like that, which just compounds the situation that they're in. I think at the core of it, as I say, they're missing a lot of their star players, but also trying to go back and bring back that hard physical edge that was at the centre of their game last year. They've found that hard to do for one reason or another.
Missing those players is a huge part of that. But at the same time, you expect a side like that to be able to regroup and to, and I thought it was summed up when Havili just runs through and catches the kickoff, and there's nobody there to get that. And that's just a side that isn't communicating with each other. They're botching set piece after set piece in every game. And a really telling bit of that was when they had Vern Cotter on in the commentary straight after half-time and talking to him as the Crusaders score a try. Yeah. And he was talking about energy and refocus and individual mistakes, and it was just happening like...
That's kind of the nightmare scenario.
Well, it is as a commentator, because what are you meant to do? You can't cut him short, can you?
Yeah. Look, they've got the bye now. Hopefully after the bye, they might start getting some of those players back. The second half of their program... It appears there are more winnable games for them. So, as I say, I wouldn't count them out just yet, but you asked me this a yes or no last week, and as I said to you, the answer is probably a little bit closer to no than it was last week in terms of their, making the top 6. They are going to have to put a run together in the second half of the program. I think they've got 2 games against Moana Pasifika. They're playing the Drua in Suva, not Lautoka, and those are must-win games for them. But they're going to have to win other games as well, and probably the first one back against the Hurricanes. That's going to be a key to the season for both teams.
You were at Pukekohe and you saw that game, and it's been called a game of two halves and everything else. I've taken a different angle on that MP game, and that when you're down 43-7 at half time and you're conceding more than a point a minute, the game was over at half time. Yeah. And the Chiefs buttoned off that game. I don't think there's anything to celebrate for MP there. They scored some tries, but they conceded 50. They lost by 15. And I know Tana Umaunga's not going to be happy with that. It felt like steps backwards for me. Maybe I'm just glass half empty on this, but I kind of think a team that played so well against the Hurricanes conceding 50 points is just not good.
Yeah, should I have said at the end of the game, because it's going through my head, this is a game of two halves.
No,
I thought that is such a cliche. I can't say it.
No, because it's the worst cover version ever made on TV of a television show. The second effort of it. I have to say that, but it is true. But anyway, look, I just felt bad about it because I just thought, I don't want MP to be the side that people celebrate by they score a few tries. They're better than that, and they deserve to be treated better than that.
Well, firstly, I think, the Chiefs got momentum going in the first half, and
the tackling was terrible.
Well, yeah, but also the movement of the ball from the Chiefs was fantastic, and they were really struggling to adjust to that. Did they button off after half time? Well, yeah, for sure, but I do think you should credit Moana Pasifika at least for coming back in the second half and showing some real resilience. And what I did like about it was the way they were addressed at half time. There was the coach waving his arms in the air and shouting at people. The thing about Tana Umaunga is, and I remember at halftime Beaver talking about it, if Tana raises his voice just that much, just that little wee bit, that's enough to get everyone in the room paying attention. Right. But it was calm. It was and look, they certainly did enough to restore some pride in that second half. But you're right, you can't give a team a lead like that in the first half. No team. No. Let alone the Chiefs. But they will have to take from that game what they did in the second half as a positive, and all the things that they didn't do in the first, as that's their big work on. The Chiefs, maybe they felt that the bye was starting at half-time in that game. And at one stage, it started looking just a little bit hairy. Yeah, it's still about 12 points with 6 minutes to go, though. But you did feel that they would be able to keep them at arm's length. They get the bye now, and I think it's come at the right time for them. Look, to me, they're going to duke it out with the Crusaders for top of the table, but with the ability of New Zealand teams in particular to cannibalise them, the increasing competitive this year of the Australian teams, there is a chance. I mean, the Crusaders could well go top of the table this week, but the Reds are right there with them, and the Brumbies and the Waratahs and the Force all inside the top 6. It's
crazy, isn't it? I mean, if you'd said this at the start of the season after 6 rounds, there's 4 Aussie teams and only 2 New Zealand ones inside that top 6, not a lot of people would probably believe it. I mean, we all think the Australian teams are better, but is this demonstrably so? Is it just the vagaries of the draw as well?
No, look, I do think they are demonstrably better, and you can say that they've squeezed 5 into 4 as we've talked about. That's definitely had a positive effect. But also, I think there's some good coaching going on over there. That they have good coaches, all 4 teams. The Reds, the way they beat the Highlanders. Yeah,
they played well. And they scored one outstanding try.
But to
Harry
me,
Wilson, good Lord.
Yeah, but also their set piece. Yeah, they really monstered. I think they won 4 penalties in 11 minutes at scrum time, and of course forced a yellow card as well. That's the sort of thing.
Yeah, there's an impressive win. No question about it, was it? And again, that last try, probably the scoreline looked a bit probably better in Highlanders' favour. Highlanders and Hurricanes, Tony, before we finish, are these two sides going to make the top 6? Because they're going to have to move a couple of Aussies out of the way.
Yeah, look, there's too much that's going to happen. I'm not that keen on making those sorts of predictions, simply because there's just too much that can go on. You just don't know what's going to happen in any given game. It could be a card here or there, or a couple of injuries during a match, or whatever it is. They're still in the hunt. But, and we know that the Highlanders will battle and scrap for everything, but they will have to improve their set piece. They've still got enough X factor that they will cause problems for teams. who would know with the Hurricanes? I suppose we get a better idea. They come back off the bye.
Yep.
I still think they're contenders as well, certainly to make the top 6. So I don't think anything's set in stone at the moment. It's just that those teams down the bottom 2 or 3, it's getting to the point now, if you can't start winning 2 or 3 games in a row, then you are going to fall. The Blues now, 7 points off the pace?
Yeah, and you've got the Drew of now 1 and 5, and so sure they lost 3 closies at the start, but getting belted by 50 points in Perth isn't good.
I didn't see that coming. A scoreline like that, but the Force just reminded us they've got a lot of talent in that team. There was one other thing at the weekend too, Martin, just I suppose before we wrap up. We've talked a lot positively about the refereeing at the weekend. There's been a fair bit of discussion about things that went on. There was a bit of debate about what happened in the game between the Brumbies and the Waratahs, which I must say was a surprise result for me. If a bloke's got his foot on the touchline and he bats the ball back into play, that's not out.
That's not out.
It's not out.
It's not out.
Martin, you can be lying in the in-goal area and the ball is in the in-goal. You can reach out and touch it, and that's a try. Because if you're not holding the ball, you're not considered to be in possession of the ball.
Oh, okay, okay. Learn something new every day. I would have called that out.
No, he's got a foot on the line. He slaps it back in. That's not out.
Well, that's so many rules. I mean, it's understandable if somebody gets it wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, but you've got to have.
But you've got to
have a law to govern that situation. That's the law, and clearly the player knew about it.
Yep.
The other one too was the try that got ruled out when Ben O'Keefe called play on, and it turned out he went back and checked it after they'd scored a try, and he said no, well, it was a knock on.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit from there. Because in the end, they did make the right decision. It was a hell of a long time back to have to go. But what the referees are doing is they're saying, righto, in a situation like that when there's doubt, we let play carry on. Let it unfold.
It's like the VAR, and then decide afterwards, right?
And then they go back and check. And so if it's something like that, they no longer are restricted by that two-phase law that used to be in effect. So there's been a bit of flack about that, but as Matt Burke, who I got the funny feeling was wearing his light blue goggles in that game. Of course he was. He was a great New South Wales player. Clear as day, it was a knock on. The others disagreed. But that's why he did it. But there's a couple of things. Firstly, the player safety thing. We've just got to be careful about that we're not speeding up the game so much that we're not taking full account of potential serious injuries, players lying on the ground, that sort of thing. But also that we don't go so far into letting the game flow that mistakes don't get picked up or errors don't get picked up in the lead up to a try. It's about finding the balance. And I just thought at the weekend maybe the needle just sort of came back a little bit the other way. Okay. I just hope that by and large they stick to what it's been like over the first 4 or 5 weeks of the competition, because the result has been good. But the bottom line is they got to get the decisions right. And there are times where you just have to use the technology to help you.
And the Crusaders are back, baby.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. 1 bloody year.
Well, you sound disappointed,
I am disappointed. I'm not surprised, but I am disappointed. It's like the Australian cricket team. When they're down, you just want to keep them down there. This is what happens when they win 7 in a row.
Yeah,
but I always thought they'd bounce back. I was never on the, Rob Penny's a rubbish coach or anything like that. I like Rob Penny, and I just thought, this team,
anyone who has been the captain and at the same time chief executive of the Marlborough Rugby Union,
there you go,
which Rob Penny once was, he's okay. But I don't have a favourite Super Rugby team. I'll just state that for the record.
No, you're Tasman and you're Tasman and you're Tasman.
But when the Crusaders are playing, if they're any team that's playing that sort of rugby, love to see it.
This is the DSPN.